of them. You read last week about the club downtown, the white club that was voting on whether it would let women in. And the thing that I found interesting about it, though, it's a club, it's a social group, and the thing about these Susu groups and the other groups, there was always a part of these groups, many of them was a social relationship. Often before the giving of the money took place, there was a party, the host fed the parties, and so there was an attempt there to produce a whole social relationship, just not a business relationship, but an atmosphere of fraternity and conviviality was created there as well. And it's interesting, of course, to note then, and as I go into business deeper and deeper, I see that business is a club. It's an informal club. You pay your dues to get in. You don't get credit, man. You got to pay out the bucks, you know. People come in and say, well, you should have this, you should have that, and they don't understand. At this point, I'm at the point of having to pay out. And everything I get, I got to pay, because I'm not yet in the club, see. But after I pay a bit and get into the club, then I can say, okay, I want this on consignment. I want this for 90 days. I want this for 30 days. Then I have a man to ship me up some books or something. I sell his product before I have to pay him, then pay him with what I sold. Hold it, but you got to work up to that. In other words, then once people recognize you, remember the club, what happens? You get breaks, and things start to happen, you see. And so you see the essence, and as I go deeper into political organizations and the whole thing, you can see that it is ultimately the social network that is at the foundation of the economic and social functions of these groups. And why these men complain and these women complain? There's about 4,000 of them there or something, and it's a prestigious club because they take care of business in that club. And it's all about business. And while they're swimming naked in the swimming pools and doing all the whatever, acting business. And they're still determining yours and my fate at this point. Over tea or something, or whatever else and sitting there in an atmosphere of clubbiness and social relationships determining which way the world is going to go. And so we have to recognize then that a part of being educated in black business administration is not merely learning from the accounting books and how to balance accounts. And it's not merely marketing research and determining who has an expendable dollar and who doesn't have an expendable dollar. And not just determining pricing policy and macroeconomics and microeconomics and all of the other kinds of things that go into education. This is stuff that developed after social relations were developed, not before. That a part of the educating of our people may be in a business course, the educating of each other into trust and faith and confidence and self-knowledge and building social relationships and connections and networks. And therefore the dry course that's taught in the white Eurocentric university is not quite enough to be a foundation for black economic development, because the crucial elements which they do not teach in school, but which are the essential elements of their economy, are not being taught there, and they have to be taught and learned at some place. Those are taught. I tell people often that the white system has two systems of education: the formal one and then the informal one. The unrealistic one called college and high school, and the realistic one called life. And you see, even if a black were to get an equal education and learn exactly the same thing that a white learns in this school, he would still be at a disadvantage. Because as the New York lottery goes, you got to be what? In it to win it. I'm telling you. And so, even though you have this degree and you have this knowledge, if you're not really inside, if you're not really active and doing something, you're still not going to know it. Because the lesson in civics is not realistic in terms of how activities are really taking place down at City Hall. And so therefore your good white liberal professor who's so nice to you and so non-racial and so loving can afford to be, because his brother got control of the real world. And because his brother has control of the real world, he can act the liberal part, you see. And then you can say, well, y'all hate white folk, and I know some good white folk, and, and my professor was great to me, and not all white, when we get into all of that confusion, because, these leftists, these white leftists have projected themselves onto us and showing how nice white folk can be. While in reality, their rightist brothers have control of the economy. And so after that white boy leaves, he learns about what the real world is. And he literally almost throws away what he's learned in college. He just used that as basic concept. And now he's taught the real act of doing business. And that part, though, if we're not in it or don't study it hard and gather intelligence, we will never know about, you see. And therefore we confuse formal equality of formal education with real equality of education. And therefore the educating of a black economics graduate, you see, must be an education into reality. And must be an education carried on by people, not because they have degrees or they're in colleges and universities, but who've been parts and partial of activities and so forth, and can apprentice and mentor and bring people in and show them the realities of what is going on in the world. Now, I'll end it with this, and so we have to understand this kind of thing. And we'll see then that an understanding, a realistic understanding, realistic education is necessary for the development of our people. That the realistic economic development of African Americans is necessary for Pan-African development as well. Now, I see a lot of Negroes hide behind this black nationalism as an excuse to do nothing. Man, I'm not a part of this country. I'm going back to Africa. Chances are you're not going back anywhere. And let's face the reality of the situation. And then, but you're going to use that bravado to make an excuse for doing nothing. And therefore, I'm not going to engage in any kind of economic or social development or anything like that because this is a part of the American. Have you ever thought about taking over the system? Of subverting the system? That never occurs to us, The white South Africans run South Africa, even though they are a minority, because they have a connection with the other whites in the world. And simply because you're an African minority in this system doesn't mean that you can't get control of it. You see, we don't want to visualize it that way. We want to run from it. We have to face the fact that this is an economic giant still. Even though it's limping, it still is an economic giant in the world, ladies and gentlemen. And it still has a lot of juice left. That's right. Because as America stumbles and falls, the other world stumbles and falls. Why are the Japanese worried about the falling dollar? Because the Japanese are an exporting nation, and their whole nation depends upon export. And if the United States stop buying their products, they're going to have problems over there. Instead, and there are all other issues going on in this area that we should try to get to understand very quickly here. What we must recognize then, and the United States now is pushing Germany to stimulate its economy. Why? Because you see, it is through the stimulation of those economies that the other nations of the world also are stimulated into economic growth and development. We must understand, as black people in America, what our role is in relationship to the economic development of Africans. Just merely throwing away the economic possibilities here behind some half-thought-out African nationalism is not going to make it. The stimulation of black economic development in America can be a part of the stimulation of black economic development everywhere in the world. And you must look at it and see what that really means. When I sell African beads and pocketbooks or other products over there, I am stimulating production in Africa as well. And that's what I sell over there too. The African ambassador came to my shop last week We talked about moving African products and other kinds of products. When I sell African culture through that shop, I not only just sell African ideas, but we help also to stimulate growth and development in Africa and in the Caribbean and in other places as well. We have don't let people talk you into economic non-activity in America. Because your economic activity here can be a stimulant for economic activity all over this world. The services that you learn to sell here are the same services that you can sell in Africa and in the Caribbean. The knowledge that you gain in these universities and school here is the knowledge that can be transferred over to other universities and systems. If finally they do throw you out, you still have something to carry with you somewhere else. But to give up and fall back on some kind of half-thought-out excuse, it doesn't make any sense at all. And you have to think it through. So as black nationalists, you got to think this thing through and get off of this emotional bit about, you're going back to Africa and all of this other kind of thing, and therefore you're not going to engage in. And there's some Negroes who think since they don't engage in business, they're somewhat less capitalist than black people who do, even though they're working downtown like the rest of us. So somehow you're less capitalist because you're not engaging in a business enterprise. And we have some of the others who, in order to maintain their ideological purity, don't do anything but criticize and point fingers. You see? And they don't want to get their fingers dirty. The thing is, we got to look at what's going on. There's a connection between economic activity. And the other thing here is we got money. We should not only invest that money in 125th Street and the other black streets across this nation. You should invest it downtown. You work down there. The black dollar is down there. White people think if you own a place down there, it's owned by white folk anyway. So separate them from their money. We should be giving and supporting war in South Africa today, not just doing marches and giving lip service. We should be financing that war through the buying of arms and running guns and everything else to those people up there, not just walking around with picket signs. But you're not going to do that if you don't use the money. Do you know that these people are selling drugs to black people to execute wars all over this country? That the CIA is in drug smuggling to put into the veins of black boys and girls here and use that money to devastate black communities and give that money to Contras and other groups to destroy liberty and the freedom of other people? Do you know that the whole nation of England to a great extent is based upon drug money? And if you read the history of the Opium Wars, that the selling of drugs and the addicting of the Chinese to drugs was British government policies run by lords and sirs and ladies of England. That the banks in the Caribbean and the other places are there to do what? Laundry dirty money and drug money. That Hong Kong and these other places are the center of criminal money and activity. But you got to know what's going on, and you got to hook it in and be in on it and see what's happening here. But you can't do it hanging out and playing games with yourself. You got to get into it and see what is actually occurring and change the course of those activities by being a part of it. Diamonds are sold without people even knowing what the price are. Only 300 people are allowed to see what diamonds are. Why is Israel at the center of the diamond market, has no diamonds in it at all? And South Africa has literally total control of the diamond and gold market, and the Jews have control of the diamond market and gold market in New York City. Come on. See what's going on in the world and how these prices and how gold is used to trade for drugs and how it's laundered through. But we're caught out. You got to get down there. Invest down there. Invest. You use Con Ed's electricity. Why not invest and get some money back from Con Ed? Why not be a part of Con Ed and don't just beg for jobs, but demand it because you're a member of the doggone board. That's why you can get the job. And be so wrapped in it until you know what's going on, no matter which move they make. You're right on top of it. There are many ways now to invest, and I'm just getting it in here. Stock brokering and banking investment. A lot of black nationals have a problem with economics, with politics. Well, I don't vote. because I'm not a part of the system. Think a little bit now. You need conferences on what is our relationship to voting in America. Okay? What do we accomplish by voting? You see, what is the economic function of politics? Woodrow Wilson says what? The business of government is what? Business. Business. That's all it is, man. This government is not about more welfare and fair housing. It's about business. But we are given the welfare end of the thing, and you got politicians running on welfare platforms. The Board of Education is going to spend $5 billion this year. $5 billion. Tremendous wealth. More than many nations have available to them. They got some of these nations hanging on a stake because they owe something like $200 million. The IMF is going to make them literally starve their people to pay that money back. And the Board of Education itself, as one unit in New York City, is spending $5 billion. That can make a lot of millionaires. And yet over 70% of this school system is black and Hispanic. And you wonder why Jews and other groups continue to sit on there even though their children are not in it? Because they're going to steal the money and give it to their own people and tell you they're making it because they're smart. It has nothing to do with being smart. Reading this scandal should open your eyes to the reality of what goes on in government. Get out of those civics books and see what's going on here. As I told people, look here, if I had a member of the Board of Education and he came to my stationery department and said, look, hey, I need chalk for all the people in New York City, all the kids in New York City, and I can get you that contract. I don't have to be smart. Nothing at all. I got $1 million, $2 million in my pocket. Why? Because I got a friend on the Board of Education who's now going to do what? Channel millions, not pennies, millions. And therefore electing people to the Board of Education is not just about educating children, but about determining the allocation and distribution of what? Wealth. Your tax money. Money that you have put in and paid with your hard labor, and money for which your foreparents were not given one red cent. And therefore you're deserving of it, and you should get every nickel and penny of it. And the reason why you then elect somebody to the Board of Education and elect them here is not because you're into the American system and the American way. It's because you're going to get in there and get that money out and use it to your own advantage to advance the interests of your people. And this is what it's about. When you get black mayors, find out what investment banking means. Find out what public finance means. And look into what that is about. It's a beautiful thing. Do you know people can invest $1 million or more into what? And you hear it all the time. What's this guy advertised on TV all the time? Somebody's municipal bonds? Which one is it? Lebendorf. And what is he saying? Make money, don't pay taxes. Make money, don't pay taxes. How do you do that? Investing in what? City, state, to pay whom? Rich people. People who already had more money than know what to do with. Our money. But it's not coming to whom? It's not coming to us. But when you neglect electoral politics, when you elect what real public office is about, you're just electing to be robbed and stolen from. And then you don't have to talk about welfare. You see? Because you can take the money out of the public treasury and feed your people with it. That's what the other people are doing with it. That's why they're not talking about welfare, because they don't call it welfare, but they're still robbing the public treasury. And they rob it through robbing elections. That's why they get out there and vote like mad and get control of the situation like mad. The election of black mayors, businesses, municipal governments have millions of dollars in pension funds. Those funds have to be invested to earn interest and so forth, to pay people who are in retirement, to pay people who have insurance and all of those kind of things. So the city represents a tremendous amount of business, millions of dollars. So the role of the public investor is to invest that city money in various places so that the return can be made on that money, and to determine who will get that money. When you got a black mayor and you got an Afrocentrically conscious controller and so forth, they can then direct that money in areas that can be advantageous for themselves and their people and so forth. So you just don't elect a black mayor because he's some symbol and some model for your kids. You elect him because he's going to make money for your kids, because it represents an enriching of the community, because when he gets in, if he has consciousness, and if there's a voting group behind him, they can redistribute the wealth that the city treasurer and the state treasurer and the other treasurer represents back to themselves. But when you jump behind some half-thought-out Afrocentric ideology and refuse to look into the system and understand how it works, then that Afrocentric ideology is going to be identified with wealth and poverty and all the other kinds of things that we talk about today. And so we have to understand that very clearly.